Hey friends, hope everybody's doing well. If you're new here, my name is Jacob. I'm a self-taught watercolorist, and my goal is to make watercolor more approachable and less intimidating for you. And one of the most intimidating things for people learning to paint, including myself, are reflections. I avoided painting reflections for a very long time, and now they're one of my favorite things to paint. And I would like to show you a few tricks to hopefully make them easier for you as well. So here's the scene I'm going to be painting today. This is a castle in Ireland. This photo was taken by a really good friend of mine who is currently riding her bike around the world. If you can believe that. Pretty amazing. So before I do anything, before I even begin my painting, if you've been watching my videos for a while, you'll know that I always do a value study. This helps me get my mind wrapped around the scene. It helps me get a grasp on my composition. I can make sure that I like where everything is laid out, how things are flowing. And so I break the scene into three values: light, middle, and dark. The lightest values will be represented by just the white paper, and then middle value is just a mid-tone of Payne's gray or whatever other monochrome color you want to use. And then the darks are also Payne's gray, but they are a thicker mixture of paint, giving us that darker value. So you can see I've made a slight modification to this scene from the reference photo, which is I've added some mid value right here. In the photo, you've got a big group of mid up here and then a big group of mid and dark down here, creating this kind of separation. And I wanted to find a way to connect the background with the foreground. So I embellished a little bit, added some cast shadows here. Maybe there's like a tree over here in my imaginary version of this. Because I want, if it's at all possible, I want to find a way to connect all of the middle value tones into one big shape. And then within that shape, I put darks to add a little bit of separation and contrast. So this is going to act as a roadmap for me. And another benefit is I've already painted the scene once in monochrome. Now I just need to repeat the process and do it in color. So let me get my space set up and we'll get right into it. Here we go. So I've got my big old sketch ready to go here. Painting on Arches cold pressed 140-pound paper, which is usually my go-to. It's relatively affordable compared to the higher end paper, but it's not cheap and unable to respond in the way I want it to. So in watercolor, we work in layers, and we work from light to dark. So each of these layers is going to be put on the paper in what's called a wash. And I'm going to do three washes, three main washes. The first wash is going to be the lightest tones. Second wash is going to be for those middle values. And then the third wash is going to be for the darks. So I break every painting I do into those three steps: light, middle, and dark. And I do a separate wash for each of those. So in order to get ready for the first wash, I need to get my paper prepared by wetting it down on both sides. And I'm going to use this sponge to do that. Okay, so I've wet the paper down on both sides, and I went back over it with the sponge that was wrung out to kind of soak up some of that excess water. I don't need the paper to be completely soaked, just damp so that it lays flat. And because I wet it on both sides, it will stay wet for longer, which will give me more time to work wet into wet. So let me mix up a sky color. Cobalt blue. Cerulean blue. Throw a little turquoise in there. Or excuse me, not turquoise, lavender. All right, we'll just work from top to bottom. I think I want that to be a little darker, so I'm going to throw some more cobalt blue in there. I want it to be darker at the top and lighten up as it comes down towards the horizon. Paint around this castle because, well, at least the left side of the castle, which is being lit by the sun, because that's going to be very warm colors happening there. So I want to preserve that for the warms. I can paint right through the other side, mostly. There's a few highlights at the top that I need to paint around so that I can preserve those. I want that sky to get lighter at this point. Mix up a slightly lighter blue. Add a little bit more water to the mixture to kind of thin it up a little bit. So, with reflections, essentially all I'm doing is painting the exact same thing, but mirrored in the water. So I'm going to use the same colors for the sky down in the water. And one thing that you'll notice with reflections is they tend to be darker than the thing they are reflecting. So the sky and the water is going to be slightly darker. There's that shadow side of the castle reflecting in the water. Painting in some squiggly marks along that central angled part, kind of giving the idea that the water is rippling and moving around. Leave some dry brush marks in there occasionally for some sparkle. Mix up some more of that same color for the other side. That's a little too intense. So we'll just grab some from the edge of that puddle. That should work. Okay, so there's our sky color down in the water. Now, let's go back up to our castle. And we'll start painting in the warm areas. And we've got some really beautiful sandy, stony colors, very light. So just burnt umber, mixed a little bit of that into the blue that was already on my palette. Burnt umber and blue make a very nice gray. I tend to use burnt umber and cobalt blue for most of my grays. There's a little bit of yellow ochre there too. I'm trying to just get kind of a nice tan sandy color, but like a very light mixture. That should be fine, I think. Yeah, that'll work. And there's all kinds of beautiful little subtle textures going on within the stone of the castle that I will be having a lot of fun with later on, but for now I'm just putting in the basic colors, kind of changing it up here and there, adding some more yellow, just adding some variety. And see how the colors are kind of blending into each other on the paper? That's what I want. It's exactly what I want to happen, especially in the first wash, when everything's damp and flowing. Watercolor wants to flow. And if you learn to let it do that and work with that aspect of it, instead of trying to fight against it, that's where the magic happens. So yeah, just some nice subtle warm colors. I'll even drop in a few hints of red here and there, why not? While this is still damp. Just very, very subtle. I don't have to completely stay true to the actual colors in the photo. I can kind of have a little fun with it and embellish here and there. So I'm not copying the photo, it's just a reference. As long as I stick to warm and cool values, I can get away with quite a bit as far as playing with different colors. Yeah, just kind of adding some different subtle variations in colors here and there, keeping it nice and warm. Letting things blend and bleed and flow. Not worried about it. The first wash is pretty relaxing because you don't have to worry about painting exactly within the lines or getting things just right. You can kind of just have fun with it, be super expressive, let things bloom and blend. Little doorway right there with a nice little highlight that I'm gonna want to paint around later. I'm just gonna get some of that cool color in here. I'll just use the same color I did for the sky. Letting everything blend, flow, letting the watercolor do what it wants to do. I'm kind of just setting it on the paper and then essentially letting it paint itself. I really love how watercolor can look so effortless if you do it right. Oh yeah, we've got these little paths running through the grass here. It's a really cool little highlight. I really like that aspect in the photo. It creates a really nice sense of motion, leading your eye up to the castle. I mean, literally, because it's a path that you walk on. So I'll just drop in a little bit of that sandy kind of color right there. And we'll come back later on and tighten all that up. I'm going to use that same color for these rocks. But before I do that, I don't want this to dry out too much. Looks like it's already dry, but that's okay. It's not a big deal. All right, looking good so far. There's kind of a little tiny wall right there. It's got that same stony sandy color, so I'll just drop in a little line. Again, I'm not even worrying about trying to be precise. I'm just getting color on the paper, and then later on in the second wash especially is where I'll come back in and tighten up a lot of this stuff. But in the first wash, just let it go. You don't have to paint in lines, you can just go crazy. Really what I'm doing in this phase is painting the color of the light. Well, we'll drop in some of that grass now. So get some cadmium yellow, mix it into that blue that's already on the palette. It's a beautiful, vibrant green. Add a little more yellow. That looks about right. Kind of painting these background mountains here. It's a very faint blue, green, gray mix. Very faint. Okay, well there is the first wash done. So before I start the second wash, I need the paper to be completely 100% dry. It's very important that you let your paper dry out completely before you start the second wash. So I will let this dry and then I'll be right back. Okay, paper is dry enough. So I'm going to start painting the shadow side of the castle, and I've got kind of a coolish dark gray color on the palette. I'm just going to start painting the middle value shape. So this would be the second wash where we're painting the big middle value shape, just like I have it in the value study. I really like that super sharp line between the light and the dark side of this structure. It's very satisfying. It's crazy to think that people used to live in this thing. Like this was somebody's home hundreds of years ago. What a really cool, small architectural details that we can have fun with in this one. I'm not going to try to reproduce every single little detail, just enough to get the point across. Paint around this little area here to kind of pop out that highlight. Since watercolor is transparent, we need to paint around our highlights. Watercolor is extremely unique in that regard. You can't just paint highlights over top of anything. You have to plan them out ahead of time and then paint around them. It can be really difficult to wrap your head around that concept, especially if you come from a medium like acrylic or oil, where you can kind of just toggle back and forth between light and dark as you want. Cannot do that with transparent watercolor. You just cannot do it. You have to relearn how to paint from scratch when you're learning watercolor. Again, especially if you're coming from another medium. You cannot approach it the same way as an oil painting. It won't work. And that's one of the biggest reasons that I do value studies, is so that I can plan things out, so that I'm not scrambling while I'm in the middle of a painting trying to figure out, oh, what do I do? What do I do? That's where watercolor becomes stressful and not so much fun. There's a little tiny highlight on top of that, this cylindrical structure that I want to preserve. I don't know what these things are called. I know that every part of a castle has like a technical name for it, but I don't know what it is. So I'm just gonna call it cylinder thing, square thing, jaggedy thing. I am no castle expert, that's for sure. Yeah, I'm really liking that contrast between the warm colors and the cool colors on the same structure. Well, I just gave myself some extra texture there on accident. Paint around that little doorway. It's got a shadow that kind of comes across at an angle like that. Before this gets too dry, well, I need to finish painting the shape first. Bring that all the way down to about there. So here's how you get a soft edge in watercolor. So you take a spare brush, you get it wet, and then you dry off most of the water until it's just damp. And you take that brush, it needs a little more water than that, and you'll kind of get a feel for exactly how much water you need to do this with practice. But you take that brush, and right at that edge, you just kind of press into it very lightly. Do it again. And look at that. See how easy that was? And you can kind of bring it over too if you want. Rub it out with your finger if it's still too sharp. And look, see how easy that was? I just got a perfectly soft edge that shows the roundedness of this cylinder. Kind of shows that the cylinder arcs around like that. Soft edges like that are so easy in watercolor. They're so easy. Now, if you're watching me doing this painting right now and you're thinking, how in the world am I ever going to be able to do this? Let me just tell you, I have zero, and I mean it, zero formal art training. I am 100% self-taught. I learned to paint by watching other YouTubers and just trying to copy them, and failing a lot, especially the first few years. There's a nice cast shadow that goes down at an angle like that. That's really satisfying. I like that. And it was very frustrating a lot of the time, but I just forced myself to stick with it, and eventually things just started clicking. But yeah, it took a long time to get there. And my whole goal with this channel is to speed that process up for you and give you kind of a step-by-step roadmap that you can follow. And if you've been following me for a while, you'll realize that I follow the exact same process in basically every single one of my paintings. And you can do the same thing. You can just follow the exact same template for any painting you want to do, any subject you want to do. You can apply this template to it. It's just basically 3 big steps, or well, maybe 4. Value study, first wash, second wash, third wash. That's really all there is to it, big picture. So here we go. We got another beautiful, soft, rounded edge here. So we're gonna do the same thing. Just get that brush wet, dry off a little bit of that water, press into the edge. Do it again, and there you go. Now it looks like a cylinder. Maybe darken that back up if you need to. Nice. Some kind of small details here. There's something casting a shadow right there. Some small stuff going on there too. Just little tiny architectural details. Yeah, we can come back and do more of those later. So when you're painting the middle value shape, you don't want to let the edge that you're trying to paint into dry out. So this edge is still wet, so I'm going to touch into that and continue on. That will help it look smooth and continuous and effortless. There's a little tree right there at the edge of the frame, so I'll just drop that in. Just mix up some basic green. Splayed out my brush so it's got some teeth and just kind of tap it around. Using a soft brush like this that you can really splay out and get some teeth in it will make painting trees so much easier for you. All right, so that whole area is done. Now I need to figure out a way to get down to here, which we already kind of planned out in the value study. But before I do that, I'm just going to add a few more details on the other side of the castle. The window. Make it a rectangular-ish shape. There's this little thing right here. Again, I'm not trying to get all these tiny details exactly right. Just getting the idea across and then leaving it alone. I don't want to be here all day painting this. I got other stuff to do. It's one of my favorite things about watercolor is you can do an entire painting in an hour and a half, and then it's done and you can do another one. You don't have to spend weeks on end slaving over the same painting, unless you want to. If you want to do that, go for it. That's just not my style. Oh man, this is looking really cool. I'm really excited about this painting. I've never painted anything like this before. I've never painted an ancient castle, so this is really fun. And before I had this kind of template that I realized I could follow, I would have been too intimidated to try to paint this. But since I've got this kind of step-by-step template, which I can apply to basically anything I want to paint, it opens up a whole universe of things that I can attempt. I don't have to limit myself to what I want to paint. A little gate right there. Drop that in real quick. It's alright if these rectangular shapes are a little sloppy. They don't have to be exactly perfect. I am going to switch to a smaller brush though. My Skoda Perla, for these smaller shadows. Well, let's see. Okay, so as I was saying before, I need a way to get from here to here, from this area of middle value down to the middle value that's down here, which I have not painted yet. So in order to do that, I needed to invent some things. And this is a kind of trick that you can use if you find yourself in this situation with the scene you're trying to paint. Just invent some shadows, like make up some shadows, because there's some shadows right here from something over here, probably a tree. And it's not that much of a stretch to just elongate those shadows, right? Kind of using what's already in the scene to our advantage in order to find those beautiful connections between different areas of middle value. Paint over that path. All right, so there's some cast shadows on the wall from that tree, but you'll notice that those shadows are soft. So I'm gonna get that area wet, just a little bit wet. So just wet that down, and you can do this if the paint is completely dry. You can just get that a little bit wet. And now when I tap into this with paint, see how the edges are nice and soft? That's called painting wet into wet. Putting wet paint into wet paper, giving you those beautiful soft edges. Wet onto dry would be this area here, where you've got that razor sharp line between both areas of this structure. And so there you go, right there. There's so much of the magic of watercolor contained in those two areas. The razor sharp edges versus those very soft, fine, flowy, blooming edges that kind of get lost. And you can see some of that happening around the periphery of the structure, how that warm color from the structure is blooming out into the sky. It gives it this kind of ethereal glow, making it look almost dreamlike. You cannot get that effect so easily in any other medium. Watercolor just does that on its own. You don't have to do anything other than put the paint in the right area with the right amount of water. It's magic. It truly is magic. I'll just add a tiny bit of texture for the top of that wall that comes down. And again, we're going to continue with our imaginary shadow as it comes down. The shadow does not exist in the photo, but again, we're not here to copy photos, we're here to paint, to make a painting. Photo is just there for inspiration. And then we'll just drop that right down onto the edge of this wall, leave a little bit of a highlight on the top. And I'm probably going to switch back to my bigger brush so I can cover more ground a little more quickly. Let's see, add some more cobalt blue into that, some more lavender. Just some nice, beautiful, cool cast shadows. Just painting exactly what's in the value study. Paint right through all these rocks. Right down into the water. We're going to come back later and define some of these rocks with some darks. You see I'm kind of breaking up the edge of that shape a little bit. That makes it look like there's ripples happening. We'll just keep right on going with the shadows in these rocks and just throw a bit of warm color in there. I'm going to vary back and forth between cool and warm. Switch to a smaller brush. Not in a rush, just taking my time, enjoying the process. Trying to stay loose, not get too carried away in any particular detail. Just dropping in some of those dark shapes for the rocks here and there. This will help heighten the illusion of that reflection, dropping these stones that are poking up above the water. And I'm not really that concerned about getting every single rock exactly perfect. I'm just, more than anything, hinting at the texture that I'm seeing. It helps to squint my eyes so that I don't get caught up in the small details and I just see that more abstract, big shapes. And that goes right off the page. I'll come back with some cooler gray, very subtly cooler gray. There's some dark stuff going on in there. Do some dry brushing to hint at that texture. And drop in the shadow side of this cylindrical area here. Again, just painting the same exact shape, except mirrored. And we'll even smooth out the edge. A nice soft edge. Because you can still see that in the reflection. That's a soft edge. I'll leave that alone for now. There's some kind of shadows in this little tiny bank where the grass dips down. There's like a little ledge almost. I think that's a cool little detail. break up the shape here and there. These really small details are what sells a painting. It makes the illusion more believable. Okay, so I'm seeing some really cool circular ripples happening right at the edge of where that wall is reflecting. So let me drop in the dark area of the wall first. All right, that's good enough. And then I got some teeth on my brush and I'm gonna try something. Let's see if this works. Yeah. I went too steep with that arc, but that's fine. It's a little better. You're just painting in some of those darker ripples. Now we'll move on to the shadow side of the main structure of the castle that's reflecting in the water, and there's an area here where the dark and the light side kind of start to mix together. If you look in the photo, I really like that effect. And that line that divides the dark and the light areas of the castle is real squiggly in that reflection, so I'm going to do my best to emulate that. It's still a hard line, it's just wavering because the water is moving around, and that really sells the fact that the water is moving. There's a little bit of motion happening if you do that. Really going darker with the reflection. Remember, reflections tend to be darker than the object that is being reflected. And the same on the edge of this shape, it's kind of squiggly and wavy. You can even exaggerate it a little bit if you want. Really push that sense of the water moving and undulating. Drop the window in. It's all the same things I'm seeing up here. I'm just painting it a second time in the water. That's all I'm doing. All right. Just adding in a few more ripples here and there. Another thing you can do to help sell the illusion of a reflection is take a clean damp brush and then kind of pull straight down with it. Works better if the paper is still more wet than I have it here, but yeah, just lift up some of that paint. Creates a little bit of a glow. Dropping in a few darker ripples here and there. All right, so that's the second wash done. That's our big connected middle value shape. So now we can start playing around with some darks, adding some darks in here. I'm going to mix up an even darker grayish color. And to get it darker, I'm just using more paint than water. The paint is thicker. Just darkening up that little wall thing right there. There's some kind of textury stuff happening over here. I'm not going to go quite that dark to add that. Lighter. So I'm doing some dry brushing just to get that old weathered look to the stone. The same thing on the lit side. I'm using a very, very light mixture of paint for this. A fairly dry brush. There's not a lot of water in it. I just want to emphasize the texture of these stone bricks here and there. If you squint at the picture, there's a few areas where that stone is slightly darker than the rest, and I really like that effect. I'm kind of just painting these really small horizontal strokes to kind of hint at the direction that the bricks lay. There's some vertical streaks here and there too. That little bit of texture just immediately made this look so much more realistic. It's crazy what a tiny bit of dry brushing can do. Just very, very lightly brushing it over the paper. You can even come down into the water and do the same thing down there. Just hint at some of that texture. Because you can actually see it in the reflection. It's a very beautiful, clear reflection. Some reflections are more fuzzy and abstract, but this one is quite clear, almost like HD. Okay, we'll come back and darken up that some more once that's a little more dry. Darkening up a few areas around these rocks, especially towards the base where the rocks touch and rest on top of that little sandy bank area of this pond or whatever this is. Darkening up some of the shapes in here as well, just really adding some random texture. Kind of glancing at the photo every now and then for some inspiration as to the different shapes I can make, trying to vary my brush strokes. I'm not painting the exact same way the whole time. I'm not really concerned about getting the rocks to look perfect. Painting isn't about the rocks, it's about the castle. Add some texture in this shadow area here. A little bit of texture in the ground here too. We'll add some darks into that tree right here. I just took that green on my palette and mixed it into that dark grayish color. Use that same color to add some dark patches of grass within this cast shadow. And as the grass goes into the light, it'll become more vibrant again. So we'll just mix up a quick green for that. Some other little patches of grass around the rocks here. one of those really small details that'll just help sell the illusion better. All right, looking pretty good so far. So there's some really, there's some really small architectural details that I'm going to add in on the castle. I'm going to get out a little teeny tiny brush for that. Yeah, and I ended up not painting in that path. The shadow is kind of serving the same purpose that the path would have, kind of leading your eye up to the castle. Yeah, see how much darker the reflection is than the shadow side of the structure up here. We have a few birds in the sky, and I think we're just about ready to call this a finished painting. Let's see if there's any last details I want to add. Okay, there you have it. Finished painting. So I hope you enjoyed watching this. I really hope you learned something, and I hope to see you on the next one.